Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of the Hippie Sh podcast, the podcast where we talk about self-development, spirituality, and lots of fun life stuff like that. I am your host, Bryce, and I am very much looking forward to diving in to the first topic. So, the topic of today's episode is going to be the difference between toxic positivity and positive psychology. So since this is episode 1, I did want to talk a little bit about my intention for this podcast. Obviously, you can guess from the title and from the mission statement that we are all about self-development and spirituality. I want to say that I am very much a person on a spiritual journey, but by nature I am a very pragmatic person. I am not prone to picking up on the woo-woo side of things by nature. So I definitely pull a lot of my influences from psychology, along with a little bit from religion, and then some spiritual guidance that I've received, and then also just intuition and understanding myself and my own journey, my own thoughts, my own life, and the things that have worked for me over the years. I do want to make a disclaimer that I am not a licensed psychologist. I'm not a social worker. I don't come from a background in psychology. In fact, my experience in the mental health field was actually from working at a battered women's shelter for several years as a resident advocate and helping survivors of domestic violence to overcome their trauma. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is healing, and that is really what we will focus on for a lot of this series, is just healing and becoming a happier and healthier version of yourself through different practices that have worked for me personally. I will also say that I am not a life coach. I don't have a book to sell. I'm just a content creator. I have this podcast and then I have a YouTube channel. So I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm really just here to share things that have worked for me. And I just kind of subscribe to the idea that, all ships rise with the tide. And so if I can help somebody else to feel good and actualized in the same way that I do, then hopefully in doing so, I am helping to create a better world, which is something that I am very much passionate about and very much looking forward to, because I live in it too. We all want beautiful things to happen, whatever we may perceive those beautiful things to be. So in today's episode, we are again going to talk about this difference between toxic positivity and positive psychology. Now, toxic positivity has gotten a bit of a backlash in recent times, which I personally think is a good thing, and we will get into my nitpicks of toxic positivity. But I have noticed that with the rise, I think, of hustle culture, of guru culture, and especially with multi-level marketing companies becoming really popular, that toxic positivity and toxic productivity have really faced a lot of backlash recently. And I think that's very necessary. I don't believe in just thinking positive. I don't believe in just thinking good things all the time. And so that that content of questioning toxic positivity has always really resonated with me, and I'm very thankful that it's kind of having a moment of getting called out. It's almost like we're subjecting toxic positivity to cancel culture, which I think is great. I'm also seeing a lot of this in the downfall of the girl boss archetype, the boss babe, Instagram business version of success, as it starts to get called out, a lot of the other things that are surrounding that whole culture really do look like toxic positivity. I think that right now people are honestly swinging toward the other end of the spectrum, and almost adopting pessimism as realism. I will say I think that is problematic for a number of reasons, both spiritually and on a psychological level. I believe that you very much create your own reality through your perceptions, both as it relates to how I understand spirituality and in how I understand that the brain works. Reticular activating system, noticing patterns, having your core wounds from childhood and how that affects, the personal stories that you tell yourself and all of that. So it's like we're swinging the pendulum to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where there's this backlash of like the just be happy all the time people, the backlash against them. And then it's like people have instead swung over into life sucks and everything is awful, and that's the real truth. Like that's the real tea that people are choosing to adopt as their own reality now. I believe in that I live in a different space from both of those groups. And so in today's episode, I just wanted to share the way that I practice, if you want to call it positive thinking, but to share the way that I practice positive psychology in my day-to-day life, and talk about some of the flaws of toxic positivity, of course, and provide some tools for self-correction. If you find yourself leaning to either side, either toxic positivity or towards pessimism, and thoughts that aren't really serving you, that aren't really doing you any favors. And honestly, a sign that you're leaning to either side is honestly that you're feeling forced, or that you're not in a state of bliss for the majority of your day. I will say that at a base level, I truly believe that humans are really programmed for joy and for love and for peace. That's honestly our base state. And when we start to deviate from those states, when we start to feel, these other feelings, it's usually a sign that we're just, out of alignment with our authentic selves. Because I think that authentically we are just loving and we are just joyful and in a state of peace and understanding and acceptance. So, if you find yourself deviating from those feelings frequently, then I definitely think that there are opportunities for growth, and we will get to that towards the end of this episode. But I wanted to really start this episode with a discussion of what toxic positivity actually looks like, and give you like a really clear picture of it, and then also just talk about some problems with it. So some of the problems with toxic positivity are that you're honestly not showing up as your authentic self, right? So you are denying your emotions, and denial, it's like any form of addiction. When you shove those so-called, negative feelings down, you're really just creating demons, and they're going to pop up unexpectedly until you do deal with them. And if you look at the most recent research into emotional psychology, you only, as a human, you only have 4 emotions. Okay, so we have happiness, we have sadness, we have either fear or the sense of being surprised, which is the same feeling. Or excitement, it's all the same feeling. Or you have anger and disgust, which is also the same emotion on a gut level, just a different interpretation, right? So happiness, sadness, fear, or anger. So according to toxic positivity, that means that you have 1 good feeling and 3 bad ones. And so, if you're not happy, then it means that there's a problem. And the problem is automatically you and how you're feeling. And so, with this emphasis on feeling just happy all the time, we're automatically creating this inability to investigate a feeling and to sit with it and get curious about it and to make a choice about how to act on it. You just, I'm not happy, and therefore something's wrong with me because I'm not feeling happy, and so now I have to force myself to be happy. And that's the only choice that you're given with toxic positivity. You're just, if you're not happy, then you have to fix that. And you fix that by just forcing yourself to be happy. And that can, show up in all sorts of different ways. But I've noticed that a lot of the, the symptoms, first of all, if you are subscribing to, if you're subscribing to the practices that really are toxic positivity, chances are you're still probably not happy most of the time. If you're really repressing a lot of your feelings and just forcing happiness on yourself, you're still probably not actually feeling very happy. You're probably spending a lot of your time trying to be happy, and probably looking at a lot of motivational quotes, to try and get yourself to do something, right? Or, another symptom is that you're either happy or you're distressed. And there's probably no in between. There's probably no real neutral ground. Like, we're either giddy or we're in despair because we're not giddy, and therefore, something awful is happening and now I have to fix it. And your ego is probably just screaming at you, and that critical inner parent is coming out like, oh my God, you're not happy. What's wrong with you? Right? If the very idea of not feeling happy brings up some form of distress in you, if you feel shameful or guilty for not feeling happy, it's probably a sign. If you're reading a lot of self-help books, but nothing really seems to be working to, fix you, I am saying that with air quotes that you can't see. If you're not setting boundaries with people, or if you're not setting boundaries in a healthy, meaningful way, if you're not upfront about what you need, if people in your life are no longer able to recognize you, and I mean, honestly, this can be a symptom of just like having a spiritual journey, of any form, just any transformation. But honestly, like, spiritual journeys normally take a lot longer. And it occurs in a much more peaceful way, for most of us, to where your friends may no longer recognize you if you're on a spiritual journey, but you're also very much in a space where you're okay with that. And generally, you've already kind of, surrounded yourself with people that are a little bit more on your wavelength. That are a little bit more of a vibrational match for you as a person. But yeah, like, if your friends are like, did you join a cult? Like, what's going on? Are you okay? Are you on drugs? Like, if they really start to see like a negative change in you, and you're, subscribing to self-development, there's something going on there, that you may want to investigate and address. I will say that. If you spend a lot of time focusing on all the things that you should do, and there's a sense of guilt or shame when you're not doing the things that you should do or that you're supposed to be doing, basically, just if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, then chances are, if you think that you're doing the work, if you think that you're doing, work on yourself, and if you think that you're trying to achieve happiness, but you don't have that good, supportive, foundational relationship with yourself, if there's shame or guilt involved, if it's feeling inauthentic, if you're not embracing, the full range of your human, if you're denying parts of yourself for the sake of fixing yourself or fixing your circumstances, hoping that it will, solve the problem of your unhappiness, then, at the end of the day, you're still acting out of fear and letting your ego run your life. And so I would invite you to investigate whether, the behaviors, whether the thoughts and the feelings and, the practice that you're doing, I would invite you to investigate whether that's truly serving you. And, I will say that, a spiritual journey, and subconscious reprogramming and just transforming as a person and learning to work with your brain, and get it working with you rather than against you, it takes time, and at times it's going to be very painful, but there is a lot of beauty in it. And if you are going about the journey in a way that is serving you, you are going to find a lot of evidence that things are going okay. And that could, be synchronicities, that could be, seeing 1111, that could be hearing, the guidance from your spirit guides. But it could also just be, recognizing hey, my boyfriend didn't text me back for 3 hours, and normally I would have told myself that he was probably dead in a ditch, or he was cheating on me, or he hated me, or, whatever. And instead, he didn't text me back for 3 hours, and I was just fine. You'll see moments like that during spiritual growth and during psychological development. And, you'll find those moments where you're really standing in your power along the way. And it's not going to happen all at once for the most part. Maybe you'll get really lucky and you'll just wake up one day and be okay. But for most of us, it does take work. It does take time. But it also doesn't feel very forced. And so, if you're doing the work in a way that it's really serving you, and if you're doing the work that truly resonates with you and that truly has a lot of benefits for you, then you're going to notice the evidence along the way, and things will start to feel good pretty quickly if you're committing yourself to it. Versus with toxic positivity, those are usually practices that it's going to be very all or nothing, and you probably won't have a lot of resources for dealing with, the concept of failure. Not that I even believe that failure exists at this point in my journey, and that may sound alien to you regardless of, which path you have chosen. But, really look at the work that you're doing and really look at where you've gotten. And I would invite you to investigate whether you feel like you've truly reached a state of happiness, or whether you're just forcing yourself to be in that space of happiness, maybe prematurely, maybe before you're ready. And I will say that I like to think of, this whole spiritual journey as a preparation for true bliss. Sometimes I'm still going to have some down moments, but that's okay, because I'm just preparing to feel even better in the future, right? But yeah, so check in. All right, so on the other end of the spectrum, not so much on the other end of the spectrum, but alternatively, we do have positive psychology. So what is positive psychology? Psychology is all about studying the mind and finding practices to help transform the mind. I will say that positive psychology does have a lot of overlap with spirituality as well. And I think that is a very beautiful thing, because if you have, a more clinical mind, a more pragmatic mind like I do, then you have the opportunity where you can take things that work from both psychology and from spirituality. And I think they work very well together. And, that's why I really get into that with Hippie Sh. Finding those areas that overlap, where, maybe the message is worded a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, the concept on a base level is the same. And not only is the concept at a base level the same, but also, sometimes the message is delivered in a couple different ways. And I find that for me, even though I do have a very pragmatic mind, my mind has become significantly more open during my inner work. And so it's very helpful for me when I can hear a concept, when I can hear a message in two or more different ways, because sometimes, something that psychology is teaching me doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't understand it. And then I'll look at it from a spiritual perspective, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Or obviously vice versa. Sometimes you're, hearing something from spirituality, and you're like, okay, whatever. Like, that sounds like nonsense. And then, you look at that from a psychological perspective, and you're like, well, there's clinical evidence that works. So I try to find the areas that overlap, just to know that I am doing the work that's going to serve me the best. And so positive psychology is really about transforming and reprogramming the brain to work with you and help you reach your goals, rather than working against you and acting as a barrier. And it's the idea of like healing your attachment style so that you can be secure in relationships. It's about reprogramming, the core wound of unworthiness or abandonment so that you can set healthy boundaries in relationships and stop people-pleasing behaviors, or ask for a raise at work, or just, ask for help when you need it, and show willingness for vulnerability and allowing that connection into your life, on an authentic level. Positive psychology is embracing your emotions, all four of them, and feeling them and investigating them so that you can process them and heal through them, and to learn to recognize your own needs and then learn to meet those needs. And so, like I said, I think that toxic positivity, honestly, it creates demons by repressing emotions, whereas positive psychology means processing emotions in a healthy way and using them as a tool, like a meter, a way to measure where you're at, in order to find that healthier, better life. And then spirituality, done correctly, means recognizing that your emotions are a really powerful indicator of where you're at and whether you're in alignment with your authentic self. And so both positive psychology and spirituality would tell you, like, hey, your emotions are good and valid. And you need to hear them and think them, because they're serving to show you where you need to place your attention. Either in showing up for yourself authentically, or, in manifesting something, or in taking this step on your spiritual journey so your soul can grow and you can grow with it. And then toxic positivity is like, hey, you're feeling sad and you shouldn't feel sad because sadness is a bad feeling. And so now, you're either still sad because you couldn't somehow force yourself to feel happy without meeting your own needs, through sheer force of will, or you're just creating a demon that's going to pop up eventually by denying that feeling, which frankly sounds exhausting and miserable. In either way, you're also probably going to feel guilty about either still feeling sad, or you're going to feel guilty just for feeling sad for a moment, because you're not supposed to feel sad, and therefore you did something wrong by feeling something that wasn't positivity. And I feel like, in a way, there is, for me, no better way to make myself feel absolutely miserable than to dedicate myself to trying to stay positive. That's so impossible, and it's so unhealthy and inauthentic, and it just doesn't serve you. At the end of the day, trying to force yourself to just be positive, just be happy, it's not helping. It's not doing you any favors. And so I am all about tangible actionable advice. And so my tangible, actionable advice for this episode is to make it a point to practice feeling your wide range of human emotions and recognizing that they always serve a purpose. So your feelings are an indicator that your needs are not getting met. You know, if you look at this from just a psychological perspective, your feelings indicate that you have an unmet need. And so your feelings are your brain's way of nudging you to tell you, hey, you need something. You need to do something about this. And from a spiritual perspective, you know, feelings are guidance as to whether or not you are in alignment with your higher self. And so if you feel something other than joy or peace or love, then, you know, that's something to address and not something to repress. So try to figure out where your feelings are coming from and what they are trying to tell you. You know, which need have you not met? What itch do you need to scratch? What core wound is getting triggered? What stories are you telling yourself in this moment? You know, are the stories true? Are there better stories that you can tell yourself? Can you let the feeling come and pass through you and then maybe get to a space where you can learn from it and then eventually let it go? Can you observe it without getting overly involved with it and wallowing in it? Can you recognize that your feelings are always valid and that they are always a symptom of your psyche trying to keep you safe? Can you recognize that keeping yourself safe is always a good and valid and okay thing to do because you deserve to feel safe? And can you let yourself do all of that without judging yourself or your feelings or your actions as a result of those feelings by virtue that it's always okay to feel things? And from a spiritual perspective, from the hippie shit woo-woo perspective, can you accept that your feelings are the only way that you can possibly manifest good things into your life? Can you recognize that negative experiences and bad feelings are the results of you in this moment being out of alignment with your higher self, thus creating this conflict that serves the very useful purpose of educating you on what you actually want? Can you accept that in having this experience, you've now pulled into existence what you do want? And can you then find a way to pull yourself back into alignment with what you do want and surrender your limiting beliefs that are holding you out of alignment? Can you let go? Can you trust the universe to provide better experiences and then get into the receptive mode to allow those experiences to manifest into your physical reality by, you know, no longer focusing on the negative experience and instead focusing on the desire, and yes, the good feelings that come from the thing you want coming into your life? Can you find a space of gratitude for the negative experiences, knowing that they were chosen by your soul and delivered by the universe in the exact moment that they needed to come in order to provide a stimulus to continue your movement forward on your journey? Can you know that this is an opportunity to grow stronger and to pass this test so that you can show that you've learned and that you're ready for the next step? Can you accept that even when your feelings have been hurt and even when you're experiencing pain, at the end of the day, no matter how loud your ego is screaming, no matter how badly your heart has been broken, in reality, you, as a consciousness, as the observer of the events unfolding in your life, are still very much absolutely okay on a base level, no matter what happens in either the external world or in your own head. Can you surrender to the idea that you, honestly, in this moment, are okay? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then that's okay. Now you know where you are. Now you know you're present. Now you know what you can practice and work on in order to reach the state of peace and love and joy and enlightenment. And that again, is nothing to be ashamed of. That is nothing to feel guilty over. That is beautiful. That is showing how much of a capacity you have to grow. That is showing how much more room you have in your life to enjoy a full human experience for all that means. And that also has nothing to do with feeling happy through force all the time. I'm going to leave you with a really powerful quote from Michael Singer from his book, The Untethered Soul, which I will reference frequently and which I highly recommend. Everything will be okay as soon as you're okay with everything. And this is a quote that really guides a lot of my decisions and a lot of my day-to-day experience. This is a quote that I have written down on a post-it that, sits permanently on my desk immediately in front of me as I'm working. This is a quote that really helps you to keep your ego in perspective. Now, does that quote say anything about forcing yourself to be happy all the time? No, not at all, because that idea of forcing yourself to be happy, even when you're not naturally happy, that would mean not being okay with the idea of not being happy, right? And everything will be okay as soon as you're okay with everything. And that is the only time that everything will be okay. So if you can't accept the idea of not being happy, then you're not okay. Everything is not okay, right? If you want to truly be okay, and if you want for everything in your life to feel okay, then you also have to be okay with not feeling happy. You have to be okay with the experiences that cause you discomfort. You have to be okay with the feelings and thoughts that come from your interpretation of your experiences and allow them to happen. You don't have to get involved with them. You don't have to incorporate them as part of your identity. You don't have to do anything other than observe them. And really, you shouldn't do anything other than observe them. You shouldn't be overly involved in your feelings or your thoughts or your stories. You do need to maintain a mindset of surrender and of allowing and of acceptance. And that means that when your feelings come, even when they're not happiness, you do have to allow them to happen. You cannot repress them. You cannot just force yourself to feel happy. It is not possible. It is not sustainable. And most importantly, it's just not healthy. It's not constructive, right? It's not serving you. And that is the real difference between toxic positivity and positive psychology. It's allowing, it is surrender, it is connection with yourself on an authentic level. It is giving yourself permission to feel human, whatever that looks like for you from moment to moment. And that is living the good life. That is experiencing peace, love, and joy, and enlightenment. That is living from a space of surrender. That is following the law of allowing. That is allowing yourself to flow and to manifest the good things that you want. It's not a matter of, I want to achieve a goal, and so I am going to force myself to work incredibly hard, incredibly long, brutal hours to achieve that goal, while also forcing myself to never experience stress from overworking and denying what that is doing to my mind and to my body through sheer force of will, through listening to motivational speakers, through reading motivational quotes, through over-caffeinating myself, through, I don't know, taking a lot of Adderall. Overwork and workaholism, which I hate as a term, but that overwork is honestly coming from a from a space of not feeling worthy, right? It is coming from the lie, the ever-present lie that you don't deserve what you want. That is coming from a space of telling yourself that I want this, and to get it, I have to earn it. And to earn it, I have to work myself into the ground. I have to work myself so hard and push myself so hard that I reach a level of deserving that I think feels appropriate for the goal, for the end. You want the means to justify your receipt of the end. And when you're coming from a space where you don't feel like you already deserve something as it is, then you're just going to continue to find all of this evidence that you don't deserve it. And there's a good likelihood that even if you work 18-hour days for a decade trying to achieve this goal, you may get there and you may feel a sense of accomplishment, but I would hazard a guess that that sense of accomplishment is going to be very fleeting and that it's not going to last very long. You know, maybe you'll get a few days of satisfaction, but there's a good chance that then your mind is going to immediately go into, okay, what now? And I say that with love, because I've been there before. You know, I have very much had that experience. I understand that feeling of constantly trying to push yourself to higher levels and to achieve bigger things and better things and to earn what you think you want. But I am here to tell you that if you spend all of this time forcing yourself to overwork so that you can earn whatever it is that you want, then you are also spending all of that time training your brain to believe that you don't already deserve it. And if you believe on that core level with so much mental energy, with so much investment of time and of thought, that you don't already deserve what you want, then when you finally reach that goal, that belief is still going to be with you. It doesn't just release, right? And you can see this example in, you know, everywhere, honestly. You know, why do a lot of relationships fall apart? It's because people say, I want a partner, and then they don't do the inner work. They fall into a relationship. They are very, you know, fortunate to be presented with a relationship that is honestly a reflection of their own lack of self-work. And so you end up in a relationship with somebody that you don't feel like you often deserve. And then you spend a lot of time trying to do things to then deserve to be with that person, and trying to fix things and trying to take care of things and predict the future, and it causes all this anxiety. And what happens is you end up pushing that person away, or, you know, you don't learn to see the good things in yourself, and therefore you're not yet capable of seeing the good in other people on an authentic level, and you're also not capable of receiving the compliments when other people give them to you, right? And if you don't learn to recognize these beautiful parts of yourself and really put in that work, then what happens is that you never set up the neural pathways to understand that good part of yourself. And so when you receive compliments, it feels inauthentic, and you tell yourself, oh, they're lying, or they're just, you know, I need to compliment them back, or it just causes anxiety, or you otherwise crave compliments, or worse, you crave validation and attention, but you also don't know how to receive it. So you're just in a constant state of being attention starved and seeking the right behavior that's going to get you the attention that's going to make you feel whole. And that simply doesn't exist. There's no way for that to exist. And, you know, you also see this in like lottery winners, right? Where the vast majority of people that play the lottery are very near the poverty line, if not below it, and they will very frequently win the lottery, and then their entire lives just fall apart. And it's because they never they never took the time to address the stories that they were telling themselves about how they were so poor and so lacking, so broke, or so broken, and they never told themselves that they were wealthy. They never learned to feel wealthy. And I mean, you can also trace a lot of this back to, just people that don't have money are generally not very good with money. And I know how that's going to sound. But if you don't have a lot of money, it's very difficult to bother to take the time to educate yourself on what to do with money, right? So I know that growing up, my family never had any money. And so when I became an adult, I really had to take the time to understand what to do with my money and to understand it and to have a good relationship with it. And I will say that I've made plenty of mistakes. I will say that I still don't, I still haven't seen the physical manifestation of a lot of it. But I do have a respect for it, and I do understand how it works now. And that took a lot of work, and it took a lot of work not only in the practical, learning how money functions, but also just in addressing within myself those limiting beliefs of like, I grew up poor, and so poor is all I know. And you really have to let yourself let go of that identity before you can ever not be poor. And so, lottery winners hold on to the identity of being a poor person who just won a lot of money, rather than saying, I'm now wealthy, and then, aligning with that belief. And so they lose it, and they lose it in a whole bunch of different ways. And often their lives just completely fall apart. And I think a lot of that is because the ego is threatened, and so they start to make terrible choices that really don't serve them, because their ego is freaking out, because their ego is now, their very identity is being called into question. They still identify as poor people just with money, but that doesn't seem, that contradicts itself. And so now they need to shed that identity of being poor and take on this new identity. And that needs to be a gradual process for a lot of people. You need to transform your identity very slowly over time, or it's very jarring to the system. And so the ego, in trying to preserve their sense of identity and trying to protect them and keep them safe, it just doesn't know what to do. And so it starts to overreact, and they make a lot of very questionable choices that from an outside perspective are very easy to recognize. But in the moment, in that human experience, most of us would do the same. It would take an insane level of spiritual and psychological development to handle a very sudden identity change like that with grace, right? And, I don't think that most lottery winners usually, immediately go and hire, a counselor and a life coach to help them, and so when you are trying to achieve something, when you are trying to reach a goal, what you really need to work on, the real work, is in shedding the portions of your identity that are holding you back from achieving that goal. And that is what is meant by coming into alignment. It is, I want this. Now, which parts of myself are not ready to receive that? Right? That is the concept of, if you want the ideal partner, you first must become the ideal partner. And that doesn't mean, I want, a 6'5" beefcake, and so therefore I must become a 6'5" beefcake, and then I can just have myself. No. Nay. Shout out to Bailey Sarian. But you have to look at what you expect that ideal partner to provide for you, right? The needs that ideal partner would fulfill. And then you need to learn how to fulfill them within yourself, because you need to understand what it feels like to have your needs fulfilled. You need to understand what it feels like to be a whole, complete person. Because, first of all, realistically, nobody can complete you. Nobody can make you whole. But if you are seeking an ideal partner to help you feel whole, you must first feel whole by yourself. Because if not, then what happens is that we either cling because, our needs are met and we feel whole, and then we get overwhelming anxiety that that's going to go away. Or alternately, it feels so foreign and so strange to you to feel whole for the first time in your life, to have your needs met from this other person, that you don't trust it. And you're so not used to having all of your needs met that your brain just doesn't recognize it. It doesn't know what to do with that. And it starts to set off all of these warning bells. And then you get overwhelming anxiety that causes you to become very dismissive and avoidant in your relationship and push that person away, right? So the main issue that I have with toxic positivity is that it doesn't address any of that. The only answer that toxic positivity has for anybody is just be happy. And that's it. That is the means, and that is the end, is just be happy. And for the main points, and what I will truly leave you with for this episode, is that if there is one true answer to everything, if there is one both means and end to finding peace, it is surrender. Surrender is the solution that you can really focus in on to find a lot of resolution to things going on in your life, because that is a space where you truly feel okay. And surrender is something that you will need to practice every single day. Surrender is not an overnight concept, and surrender is not easy. It is simple, but it is not easy, and it takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes dedication. So what I will encourage you to do today is to commit yourself to the practice of surrender, not of happiness, not of positivity, not of just thinking good thoughts, but of surrender. And there are many ways to go about this. We will get into that in future episodes. For now, if you're interested in learning surrender, I can't recommend enough checking out The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It is a wonderful read. I am not affiliated with him or the book in any way, but it is a book that has truly exponentially furthered my spiritual journey and helped me immensely throughout the process. So with that being said, thank you so much for connecting. I am very much looking forward to seeing what I can bring into the world with this podcast, and in what ways I can help people and truly serve the highest good. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you leave a comment or reach out to me. Let me know if you have any requests for topics, or perhaps people that I could reach out to maybe guest interview in an episode. Other than that, I will send lots of good vibes to you. I love you all, and I hope to see you around for episode 2.